All right, we'll wrap up our talk on your class of 2020 with linebackers, DBs, and then a quick look at a couple of special teams guys who will probably, at least one of them, factor pretty prominently this season. Let's start at the linebacker spot. It's a big class because you have a lot of seniors, and certainly you feel pretty good about what you've got this year, but after this year, there's going to be a lot of questions about who plays where. So let's look at five guys who could factor into that discussion.
Yeah, kind of linebackers, DBs, O-line. You see all those seniors, so you got to keep replenishing it,
Right.
So they're ready to play. And the first guy I'll start with is Sean Chambers, and I played next to his dad my sophomore year, and his dad was one of the biggest, angriest, meanest, toughest, hardest working players I played it with. Well, Sean has a different athletic ability than his dad, Josh. I was just with Josh in Chicago. Sean was a quarterback last year, unbelievable leader, played defense, and he, I don't tell the coaches these are my buddy's kids because I want to get an honest evaluation. He comes to camp and this guy is an unbelievable fit for us. That was the terms on him. He just does everything so well. His comp is Andrew Starks, high school quarterback, Chicago, became a defensive player, possible safety, more likely being a Sam, similar intangibles. Andrew was one of the better leaders we've had, and everybody raves about Sean the same way. So really excited about him. Carter Mulrow, I comp with Rohan Hilton, coming from Florida, really athletic, shorter linebacker, but just explosive on it. We've had really good success with some of the undersized linebackers who can flat out run and explode on contact. He's one of the guys that I believe will be able to do that and help us early with that. John Orr, physically, I don't make the comparison with Steve Cody. Steve was bigger and broader. He's taller and leaner, but the way they move, their lateral agility, Steve was as good as we've ever had here.
Yeah.
I mean, you go back to, you might have to go
pre-injury.
Back to Dave Patterson pre-injury.
Absolutely.
With him, his junior year video, it stood out. And John's the same way on his high school tape. His agility, his ability to run and just change directions is absolutely tremendous. And he stood out at camp that way. Richard Raga, coming from Moeller, another Cincinnati guy. We've missed that big, physical, linebacker. Kingsbury's probably the last just purely in the box linebacker that we've had. And we've missed that, and we were really, that was going to be a priority in this year's class. And he stood out this film. He is a tall, athletic, but strong, and really got a lot of weight in his lower body, where he's going to be an impact tackler inside the box. And then lastly, with Chase Williams, I'll go to Dorian Williams, no relation, but just like Dorian, is he a safety? Is he a Sam? Is he a nickel? Dorian was the same way.
If you're good enough, you're going to play.
You're going to play, and we'll figure that out, as he gets here. He's a tremendous lacrosse player. You watch he's just one of those guys that can run, that can make plays in space. He's longer than Dorian, probably not as quite as much straight line speed, but can see him really, being down closer to the ball than being a deep half type safety, but being a guy who's making plays in the run game and covering the flats really effectively.
Defensive backfield guys that, are going to come here in late August and, possibly be able to compete for time in a rotation of just, like you said, besides, Gales and Fox, a lot of young guys and a lot of inexperience there. So, anybody that maybe jumps up and finds some time next year even.
Yeah, Tyler Campbell, I'll keep it alphabetical with all these position groups, but Tyler Campbell reminded me a lot of John Hill. And he's a little taller than John. John won the 100-meter dash 2 years in a row. He's not quite that fast, but it's just he plays with this. He's a quiet kid off the field, but he plays on the field with this aggressiveness. And I love it when you got these guys that are a little undersized and just are on attack mode and aggressive mode. And that's how John had that chip on the shoulder and why he was successful as he was as a cornerback for us. TJ Floyd is, to me, very similar to Phil Baia. might be a corner, might move back to safety, great leader, really good movement skills, terrific instincts. Phil had tremendous ability to make plays on the ball, and TJ, I feel, is going to be in that same category. Phil Frost, we lost our big skinny and Kamal Brown, and Phil's the same type of raw, athletic, tall, lean. We're really working on him to put some more weight on, but like Kamal, he just has a knack for making plays, and his length is a huge asset for him, which really helped KB out as well. And then the last one of the DBs is Christian Sullivan, and compared him to Matt Arenz. He, like Matt, is just the most intense. He comes to camp, and you could tell this guy was different. The way he approached every drill, that this guy stood out, and just, it probably comes from high school, probably comes from how they're raised, but we get some of these guys that are just so get how important this is to make it. And he's the same way as Matt when it comes to those intangible qualities, and has a similar frame to him.
So we've talked about a lot of guys who, could find some time sometime next year, and hopefully are impact guys over the next 4 years. We get to the last two guys, and one of them, you could argue, might be the biggest impact freshman, at least on day one, and that's your place kicker, because you lose a two-time All-Ivy kicker in Nolan Beek, and right now, is Tavish Rice kind of the guy?
Yeah, well, obviously, high school to college kicking is a big adjustment, the tees and everything else, but we really emphasize getting a chance to see them in person at camp, where we take some of those tools away. And we're at camp, and the ball explodes off his foot. I mean, he hits the ball, and he's just a big guy. If you were blind and you had to pick a kicker at that camp, and there's 50 of them, he's the guy you're picking, because the ball, you can hear the thump, as it hits his foot. And like Nolan, he is big, he is strong. The thing, the taller guys have to work on their accuracy. There's more moving parts, like a baseball pitcher, and it takes sometimes those taller baseball pitchers a little longer to get in that constant routine of where their arm slot is and their body mechanics. It'll be the same thing for him, but he's one of those guys that works really hard at this. He wanted to kick 1,000 balls, and finally we're like, hey, we're good. I mean, we've seen you, and let some other guys kick here. But he really stood out for us. And Christian Seon is a long snapper, came to our camp 2 years in a row and was the best guy. And obviously with Pat Hall having such a good sophomore year, we were kind of, you got to be better than Pat, clearly, for us to take one that year. But we really thought we were going to take one this year. So when Pat's a senior, you got a freshman in there, and he came and just wowed us 2 years in a row. And we feel he's going to be very competitive with Pat.
The one thing you keep mentioning when you talk about these guys is seeing them in camp. How important is seeing these guys in camp? Because you have a lot of people that would, love to come here. How important is it getting them here, getting them on camp, and being able to evaluate them yourself?
Yeah, I mean, you pick a college, and I tell these guys it's a marriage. Like, I am married to Princeton, not just my 4 years, but when I was at the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm Princeton football, I'm Princeton University. Every job I've had, I'm Princeton. And another coach might be University of Washington. Another coach might be the Ohio State University, wherever, but that's who you're married to. And I don't say nobody, but you don't go on a speed date. You got to spend time. You spend time with Dennis Goldman, you're a wide receiver. You spend time with Steve Irby. You spend time with James Perry. You leave there saying, man, I want to play for Jim Salgado. I love how he coaches the defensive backs. Look at all these guys. Our staff is made up of mostly guys who coached NFL and Division I football. So players want to be good. I mean, they want to be great. They want to be developed. There's coaches who just recruit, and that's great. I mean, there's salesmen, there's everything else. And you get there and their players don't develop. I think when they come to camp, they say, well, hey, these are good people, and they're going to work their tails off. Jason Gallucci, along with the rest of us, and seeing them reach their ability. And that's, at the end of the day, how hopefully we become a really good team.